There has been a fire reported in the building. Please proceed to the nearest exit and leave the building.
This is just a drill.
Outside security. Floor 2 is clear.
Veterans Day, Black Hole, 2010.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Deciphering My Experience. My name is Eric, and we're going to have some fun today. I've been talking a lot lately about unity in the community and, what you can do to help. And I just want to let everybody know I've been getting a lot of positive feedback on that. The response has been great. I see a lot of people sharing the same energy and wanting to throw their hat in the ring. So today's episode is, again, about unity in the community, and I want to give thanks to people that are putting their energy in. So for starters, today we're going to be covering some CIA documents that were sent in by a comment. Someone by the name of the Nutball News came across some great documentation, shared it in a comment. I took a look at it, and thank you very much for sharing that, the Nutball News. I look forward to talking to everybody about this. Also, check everybody out on MeWe. People are jumping over there like crazy as of late, so I'm happy that people can find me over there, Deciphering My Experience on MeWe. Come take a look. And then also to the patrons that I now have on Patreon, thank you very much. There'll be some links below for Patreon and PayPal as well. I do appreciate the support. And if you can't support in that capacity, like, share, and subscribe as well. I would really appreciate it. And do that for anybody that you support. I appreciate it, and I'm sure anybody else that's really trying to do the things for the community would appreciate you supporting them as well. So if you can't be there in the front lines with those folks, then support the folks that you support being there. Also, I want to say thanks to Odin on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network. I've been doing some guest spots on there recently, and he's asked me to come on board and do some shows for them as well, and I'm really looking forward to the opportunity. So I will also be on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network. We're just getting all the production stuff figured out, time slots and things like that, but I am looking forward to it, and it should be a lot of fun. There's a lot of positive activity going on in the community, a lot of changes happening. Obviously, the world is going nuts right now. The Nutball News probably knows that. But we, the people, are going to bring this back together. We're all in this together, and all of our problems can be fixed. So there's been problems going on for decades. Everybody knows it. This episode, we're going to discuss one of many CIA documents that have been dug up that basically give us insight to the problems. And this one is a doozy. So let me pull my screen over here. Pop it right up. Okay, so let's get into this guy here. We got the Air War College, Air University, Psychic Warfare, Exploring the Mind Frontier, Dolan N. McKelvey, Lieutenant Colonel, USAF, research report submitted to the faculty. You know what, you guys probably don't want to see me screaming through this thing. So I will just, I'll read it to you. It's not much to look at. So I'll get it out of your face. Okay, so table of contents, nothing fantastical. A little disclaimer there. Air War College, research abstract. Title, Psychic Warfare, Exploring the Mind Frontier. Author, Dolan M. McKelvey, Lieutenant Colonel, USAF. Man's greatest potential remains a prisoner of man. Vast, untapped mental capabilities create an entirely new battlefield dimension, which, if ignored, pose a threat to self and country more serious than nuclear weapons. This threat starts from within. Our fears and cynical attitudes toward psychic capabilities make us our own worst enemies. The Soviets, on the other hand, take psychic research very seriously at all levels, particularly for its military application. Exploring the mind frontier is essential, and the key to successful exploration is a greater psychic awareness. The mind is rich in unfathomed resources ripe for exploration, a limitless source of treasures for advancing all mankind, and a serious threat to those who ignore its potential. We must overcome our psychic inhibitions, stop denying the existence of paranormal events, and start trying instead to understand the nature of these phenomena. We must shed the super secret cloaks and educate our leaders at all levels on the real psi military potentials and threats so we can adequately focus and prioritize national resources. Only through greater openness and awareness to the truth can we adequately prepare. Sounds like they were onto something. They weren't very doubtful. Here's a biographical sketch. Lieutenant Colonel Dolan M. McKelvey, USAF, received a BS from the United States Air Force Academy and an MS from Kansas State University. His extensive computer science and systems engineering background have taken him from vacuum tubes to integrated circuits, from slide rules to worldwide computer networks, and from human senses to high-tech space-based sensors. He recognizes the existence and tremendous potential inherent in extended mental capabilities and is concerned that their potential impact on the military and a computer-dependent world is grossly underestimated in Western society. He is a graduate of the Air Force Squadron Officer School, the Air Command and Staff College, the Armed Forces Staff College 75, and the Air War College Class of 88. That paragraph's a recap. Introduction. In December 1980, Lieutenant Colonel John B. Alexander, U.S. Army, authored an article in Military Review entitled "The New Mental Battlefield. Beam Me Up, Spock." In this article, he challenged the imagination of his readers when he stated, to be more specific, there are weapons systems that operate on the power of the mind and whose lethal capacity has already been demonstrated. There you have it, folks. This is not a new thing. I'm not blowing smoke for you folks. These weapons have been around for a while. He discussed psychotronic weaponry and provided eye-opening, unclassified information on both Soviet and American research into parapsychological phenomena. He concluded, the impact that psychotronic weaponry and other paranormal applications will have in the future is difficult to determine at this time. Whoever makes the first major breakthrough in this field will have a quantum lead over his opponent and an advantage similar to sole possession of nuclear weapons. The intent here is to emphasize the need for more coordinated research in the realm of the paranormal. Additionally, there is a need to provide leaders at all levels with a basic understanding of weapon systems they may encounter in the not-too-distant future. In a video that I've done previously, I put up a link where Dr. Giordano was doing this exact same conversation at West Point, talking to the new recruits and going over the new weapons of the modern day warfare, which is the battlefield of the mind. So this is an ongoing conversation for decades that we can follow. World War III is going on, folks. A response came almost immediately. In January 1981, columnist Jack Anderson of the Washington Post was quick to demonstrate American skepticism of psychic research in an article entitled "Pentagon Invades Buck Rogers' Turf." Anderson's one-sided derogatory prose was filled with terms like futuristic fantasies, hogwash, and voodoo warfare. A month later, Anderson was back reinforcing psychic skepticism. This time he began, "The brass hats are indeed dabbling in the dark arts." Other carefully chosen phrases included evil eye, comic strip, Ouija board warriors, and voodoo warriors arsenal. Within weeks, he returned to the subject by referring to wacky projects of the CIA or studies like a Haitian witch doctor might try. Maclean's magazine reported in 1981 that President Reagan and Defense Secretary Weinberger had to decide whether to continue funding the top secret project, which, according to Jack Anderson of the Washington Post, is currently allotted $6 million annually. Between 1981 and 1984, numerous articles appeared in periodicals revealing an astonishing amount of research in the psychic field and reflecting great skepticism amongst the scientific community. In January 1984, columnist George Herbert wrote an article entitled, "But a Peek at ESP is Justified," in a Norfolk, Virginia newspaper. He focused attention on U.S. Defense Department denials that the government was supporting psychic research. He suggested and hoped the denials were based on security concerns. Even as a skeptic, he noted, "If, on the other hand, the denial reflects a true military disinterest in the psychic possibilities, our own and the Soviet Union's, that would be reason for worry." An NBC Nightline program in February 1984 discussed the possibility of mind wars. Researchers, scientists, and government consultants were interviewed. Especially noteworthy was the general skepticism of government advisors compared with the positive convictions of researchers. And most recently, in the 11th May 1987 issue of Newsweek, Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Claire Bourne Bell invited psychic Uri Geller for a reception and dinner in Geneva during Soviet arms negotiations. He had previously arranged for Geller to give a briefing on Capitol Hill in a special bug-proof room. Most of the spectators were Hill and Pentagon aides. House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Dante Fischel came away impressed. Was Lieutenant Colonel Alexander's message taken seriously? Is the Defense Department conducting more coordinated parapsychology research? Do leaders at all levels have a basic understanding of these psychic weapons systems we may soon encounter? What is the potential threat to the electronic components which form the basic foundation of all our sophisticated weapons systems? In light of future Defense Department funding limitations, does parapsychology, the mind frontier, really offer a new battlefield dimension which warrants continued military exploration? This paper attempts to answer these questions by providing an unclassified status update on Lieutenant Colonel Alexander's 1980 concerns. It is not a research report to identify everything the government is doing. By researching events in literature in the 1980s, particularly those involving military personnel and government programs, this paper shows that too much is happening in the parapsychology field to ignore, and too little information is disseminated to know how to treat it properly. Defining parapsychology. Paranormal phenomena are observable facts or events which are not scientifically explainable at this time. Psychic research includes such phenomena as telepathy, mind-to-mind communication, precognition, knowledge of future events, dowsing, clairvoyant ability to find water, minerals, and so on, by means beyond known sensory or perceptual faculties, remote viewing or out-of-body experiences, seeing locations, objects, or events shielded from ordinary perception in a spatial location separate from one's physical body, and psychokinesis, movement of matter by mental means without use any known physical force. These types of psychic functioning are also referred to as psi, which is frequently preferred by researchers to dispel the misconception that these capabilities are outside the realm of normal human experience. Researchers contend psychic functioning occurs naturally in the everyday experiences of many people. That's what I've been saying. Psi is further subdivided into two categories. The term extrasensory perception refers to telepathy, dowsing, precognition, and remote viewing, while the term PK refers to psychokinesis. Psychotronics is the term used to describe the amplification of psychic energies by electronic devices. The first recorded experiment of psi involved the military intelligence application of remote viewing. Back in 550 BC, King Croesus of Lydia felt threatened by the increasing power of the Persians. He needed to know what they were planning. Historians give us a detailed account of just what happened. Croesus sought an oracle who could somehow perceive his enemy's plans, an oracle with proven psychic abilities. So he devised a simple test. He dispatched messengers throughout the ancient world to visit different oracles and ask for a written description of Croesus's activities at a specified time and day. The oracle at Delphi responded, "I can count the sands and I can measure the ocean. I have ears for the silent and know what the dumb man nameth. Lo, on my sense there striketh the smell of a shell-covered tortoise, boiling now on a fire with the flesh of a lamb in a cauldron. Brass is the vessel below, and brass is the cover above it." Only the Delphi oracle provided the correct response. For on the specified day, Croesus did something he thought most impossible for anyone to conceive of his doing. He took a tortoise and a lamb, and cutting them in pieces with his own hands, boiled them both together in a brazen cauldron, covered over with a lid that was also brass. Croesus' 550 BC experiment convinced him remote viewing worked for the Delphi Oracle, and provided him a significant intelligence force multiplier against his Persian enemies. How far have we advanced since then? Discovering the mind's great treasures. In over 2,500 years since Croesus' first psi experiment, it is amazing that people still know so little about this subject. Paranormal experiences occur daily throughout the world. They are nothing new, nor are they limited to particular types of individuals. Our mind contains boundless capabilities, just waiting to be recognized, used, and understood. We all accept and share at least some common understanding of this vast mental potential. We have all heard statements such as, think positive. Sayings such as this are based on our acceptance of the notion that our mental aptitude can directly affect the outcome of events. Opinions vary, however, on just how great an impact mental attitude can have and under what circumstances it can have such an impact. When we look around us, we can all recall personal experiences or those of others who have experienced some type of paranormal event. I know I have. These events demonstrate the reality of the untapped potential of the human mind. The truth is that most people are interested in psychic experiences because they are having them. Have you ever heard about dowsing to find water? I have. An old dowser used a tree branch to help some friends determine where to drill for water on their mountain property. Contrary to geologists' recommendations, he not only picked the right spot, but accurately predicted how deep the drillers would have to drill and how many gallons of water per minute the well would provide. Are you skeptical? I've seen excavators do dowsing to locate piping before, and they're very effective at it. And it's just something that you have to watch. It's hard to believe, but they can do it. They can find copper pipes, galvanized pipes. It's a skill set. According to a June 1983 Congressional Research Service report, the Soviets claim that scientific studies of dowsing have yielded significant results. Accordingly, dowsing is taught to professional mineralogists and geologists at Tomsk Polytechnical Institute. The report goes on to say dowsing, or divining for water, oil, and other minerals, is an established practice in this country and abroad, particularly in the Soviet Union. And what about the healing stories? Researchers and ordinary people around the world are witnessing and experiencing faith healings, psychic surgery, and miracles. Yeah, it's happening now too, believe it or not. You got Joe Dispenza, he's accomplishing a lot. Of course, there are frauds, but at the same time, countless numbers of people have been helped. Practitioners of holistic medicine and other healthcare specialists are exploring and using many of these dormant mental capabilities. The mind frontier is rich with resources beyond our imaginations. Many adventurous and courageous people have already penetrated portions of this region and are using their newly developed talents. A scientific understanding of how these gifts work continues to elude us. Soviet researchers and a few Western researchers think innate signals are transmitted via some type of radio wave, perhaps extremely low frequencies, ELF. U.S. physicist Russell Targ invented the ultra-high power carbon dioxide laser and is a specialist in microwave and plasma research. He also conducted psychic research at the Stanford Research Institute for years and is known as one of the prominent experts of psychic research. Russell Targ. He thinks the reasons more people have not actively explored their psychic capabilities are clear. Everywhere we look, we find images of psychic functioning that are confusing, intimidating, misleading, and terrifying. Meanwhile, critics of psi, who often know next to nothing about psi research, condemn the scientific work in this field out of fear of its philosophical implications. To date, paranormal events are unexplainable in man's view of nature. Much controversy exists as organized science and Western society quickly try to explain away very real paranormal events. The scientific community needs proof based on logical, analytical, and quantitative analysis. Such scientific approaches to psychic research always leave room for skeptics to question the validity of conclusions. Yet, as someone once succinctly noted, just because it can't be proven doesn't mean it isn't so. Croesus was convinced. He didn't let lack of understanding prevent him from taking advantage of the capability. Neither did the CIA. They didn't understand, but they were happy to take advantage of capability. This highly skeptical Western attitude has greatly affected research efforts. Western researchers' credibility is jeopardized because of the spiritual undertones associated with physics. Jack Anderson's 1981 columns on voodoo warfare clearly demonstrated a cynical attitude by labeling such research as crazy. But in response to his columns, letters poured in from the general populace supporting the research. Through greater public awareness, by 1984, even Jack Anderson was changing his tune. He stated, but there are legitimate laboratory projects that may eventually unlock the mysteries of the human mind. One of the most promising is the testing of remote viewing, the claimed ability of some psychics to describe scenes thousands of miles away. Much of the skepticism and cynicism is generated from within the scientific community itself. In Ronald McRae's 1984 book, Mind Wars, the author describes several examples of the scientific community's inability to deal with the unknown and how, in our society, the prevailing concept defines what research is acceptable and what isn't, which laboratories will enjoy the patronage of the Pope in Galileo's time or the government today, who is published and who isn't. I've seen this myself, folks. I've been to science facilities. I know the difference between the work that they're working on and the work that they're talking to you about. Parapsychology, for the most part, is and isn't publication of parapsychology papers in the major scientific journals is rare. Of course, not all scientists are skeptics constrained by prevailing concepts. Captain Edgar D. Mitchell, an astronaut on the Apollo 14 space flight to the moon, holds a Doctor of Science degree in astronautics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He conducted ESP tests on that space mission in February 1971. In the early 1980s, during an interview with Martin Ebon, author of Psychic Warfare, Threat or Illusion, Captain Mitchell commented, "During the intervening years, my work, as well as the work of parapsychology in general, has convinced me that the human organism is capable of all of the events we study in parapsychology. I have established this to my own satisfaction, if not fully to the satisfaction of all skeptics." Within the exploding technical revolution, the eminent computer scientist A.M. Turing considers the question that the only discernible difference between a human being and a computer may be that the latter cannot experience psi. Similarly, remember that in the future. Similarly, pioneer computer researcher Dr. Jacques Vallée stated, "My contention is that machines will be able to think by any human standard that can be precisely defined. But as the machines get smarter by these rational standards, it is the definition of humanness that will change. I think we will discover, beyond these rational standards, that the human race has many other psychic talents we had previously been afraid to recognize. Talents which constitute our truly genuine existence as humans. They are the only part of us worth talking about." Dr. Robert Davies is medical director of Fair Oaks Hospital in Summit, New Jersey, where he has studied neurologic and psychiatric illnesses for many years. In 1986, when discussing ESP, he said, "Too many things like this happen for it to be just coincidence. The commonalities that appear in many of these reports suggest that there may be some common physical basis. This common physical basis is what researchers are trying to determine. But to develop a scientific explanation of these events may require new principles in physics." Skeptics and cynics will always be present. Some skepticism is crucial to the scientific study of parapsychology. Skeptics are valuable when they recognize the reality of psychic phenomenon, help expose con artists, and provide objective criticism to help us better understand paranormal events. Cynics, on the other hand, are biased and closed-minded. trying to make nature change itself to conform to their concept of the universe. In spite of personal skepticism, McCrae points out the opinions of the many eminent scientists in both nations who believe parapsychology research may lead to fundamental new discoveries cannot be ignored. The other nation he is referring to is the Soviet Union. Soviet threat. This is what always gets the money out of the checking accounts for every project. Soviet threat. With these tremendous expended mental capabilities comes an equally awesome threat to both self and country, one which stretches the imagination far beyond its normal boundaries. Martin Ebon cites a U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency report entitled Controlled Offensive Behavior, USSR, which was declassified 8 years ahead of schedule. The report states, the Soviet Union is well aware of the benefits and applications of parapsychology research. Many scientists, US and Soviet, feel that parapsychology can be harnessed to create conditions where one can alter or manipulate the minds of others. The major impetus behind the Soviet drive to harness the possible capabilities of telepathic communication, telekinetics, and bionics are said to come from Soviet military and the KGB. Ebon uses extensive research to provide an in-depth account of parapsychology research in both the Soviet Union and the United States. In noting the dramatic increase in KGB security and control of Soviet parapsychology research, he concludes that psychic warfare is something to fear. After returning from a visit to the Soviet Union as a guest of the USSR Academy of Sciences in September 1983, Russell Targ wrote, many Soviet laboratories appear to be conducting experiments in which their main goal is the modification of the behavior and feelings of remote humans and animals by psychic means. In summarizing his travels from Moscow to Leningrad to Yerevan and his discussions with Soviet researchers, he notes, they universally expressed the feeling that psi's importance lies in the development of human potential, not in its possible military or intelligence application, but everyone we talked with also made some oblique reference to what we were not being shown. In 1978, Henry Griss and William Dick and the New Soviet Psychic Discoveries provided a wealth of first-hand data on Soviet breakthroughs in parapsychology and related fields. From this information, they presented an eye-opening, inescapable conclusion that the Kremlin was ready to adopt psychic knowledge for military use. They also reported on tests conducted by the CIA in 1973 involving two noted U.S. psychics. In controlled tests, the psychics projected their minds over long distances, apparently accurately describing super-secret military installations and even the contents of confidential files in these bases. During one experiment, Pat Price, described in minute detail a Soviet installation hidden in the Ural Mountains. CIA agents in Russia confirmed his description. The two psychics spied on China, and once again, ground truth agents, CIA contacts in the People's Republic, were able to confirm their accuracy. Retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Thomas E. Bearden has a Master of Science degree in nuclear engineering with over 29 years experience in air defense systems, tactics, and operations, technical military intelligence, nuclear weapons employment, anti-radiation missile countermeasures, tube artillery, and air defense missile systems. He also directed the production of U.S. Army technical intelligence on Soviet surface-to-air missile systems. In his 1980 book, Excalibur Briefing, he describes psychotronic weapons in detail, along with a mind-boggling hypothesis. He believes, quote, that by psychotronics, the minds of all men can be linked into a great supermind having absolute psychokinetic mastery over time and space, end quote. The basis for his sense of urgency lies in a non-conventional interpretation of two statements. Like Griss and Dick, he points to a statement made by Soviet Premier Leonid Brezhnev on 13 June 1973. He urged the United States to agree to a ban on research and development of new kinds of weapons more terrifying than existing nuclear weapons. The reason and conscience of humanity dictate the necessity of erecting an insurmountable barrier to the development of such weapons. It's getting hot in there. Bearden also cites a comment made in the 1970s by former Air Force Chief of Intelligence Major General George J. Keegan. The Soviets are working on weapons 20 years ahead of anything ever conceived in the U.S. so awesome as to lead the Soviets to believe that in the coming decade they would be capable of total neutralization of our ballistic and submarine missiles. Bearden feels these terrifying weapons are psychotronic or paraphysical in nature. In 1986, he wrote a book entitled Fer de Lance, a briefing on Soviet scalar electromagnetic weapons. He named the book after the deadly South American pit viper snake, which unexpectedly strikes its prey with great agility and lethal effects. In this book, he indicts the orthodox Western scientific community for its bureaucratic smugness and arrogance. He compares the current Soviet secret development of psychotronic weapons with the U.S. secret development of the atomic bomb. We have assumed that it certainly could never happen to us and that the secret weapons scenario will never be repeated. On the contrary, it has happened again. Someone else has done it, and it has happened to us. The equivalent of about 7 Manhattan projects has been poured into Fer de Lance by the Soviets, and the program has been successful almost beyond imagination. The eerie weapons are now developed, deployed, and tested. The ambush has been completed. Fer de Lance is coiled and ready to strike. Folks, this is the nature of the beast. This is what's been going on. Bearden's book provides a detailed theory with supporting evidence which he and others who share his convictions have been compiling for years. He has ventured beyond the prevailing concepts of our scientific community to find answers to real paranormal events which have been occurring around the globe. His evidence specifies dates, times, and places where these weapons have been tested and how they were detected. His theory of scalar electromagnetic waves, electrogravitation, and Jules Verne type weapons is overwhelming, as well as the ramifications. He notes that, quote, the results of psychotronic research extend into every field of military application, end quote. Almost every weapon system we presently have or are developing is totally vulnerable to scalar EM weaponry. This includes personnel, electronics, including fusing and warhead, explosives, propellants, fuels, ordnance, ships, submarines, torpedoes, aircraft, helicopters, missiles, drones, rockets, tanks, armored vehicles, weapon carriers, self-propelled and towed artillery, communications, satellites, radars, command and control, directed energy weapons systems. Oh, I didn't know they existed, but they're listed here. Surveillance and sensor systems, mines, artillery rounds and ammunition, nuclear warheads, etc. Whether the Soviets have developed all of these weapons is not the crucial point. What is apparent, however, is the tremendous potential threat of psychotronics as an instrument of power. The crucial point, therefore, is that the Soviets apparently are aggressively pursuing research to control this instrument. In 1977, Soviet parapsychology research finally became an issue the Carter administration could not ignore. No matter how skeptical some officials remained, on June 11, the KGB arrested Los Angeles Times reporter Robert C. Toth in Moscow and charged him with obtaining a secret state document, which revealed the existence of ongoing research in parapsychology at several laboratories in the Soviet Union. Soviets admitted for the first time current official Soviet interest in the military potential parapsychology. This incident focused presidential attention on a science which some of his advisors claimed did not even exist. Carter ordered a new definitive intelligence estimate of Soviet psychic research and its military potential, using all the intelligence resources available to the CIA, the first such report ever done at the pinnacle of the U.S. national security establishment. The report was completed in 1978, but only partially released under the Freedom of Information Act in 1980. Rather ambiguously, they found no evidence of a massive Soviet psycho warfare, nor did the CIA dismiss entirely the most apocalyptic allegations of secret Soviet psi research. The evidence is fragmentary and contradictory at best. A June 1983 Congressional Research Service report to Congress says, it is also speculated that the Soviet government is firmly committed to the funding of psi research and that much of this funding, variously speculated to amount to tens of millions of dollars, is directed toward military research. Yowzers. There's so many documents like this, folks, that are out there. And I'm happy this was sent to me. Thank you Thank you, the Nutball News. This is good stuff. Attempts to identify more recent and accurate funding levels have been to no avail. U.S. research. Any lack of interest in psychic research in the United States is an outgrowth of personal fears, sensationalism, and restrictive scientific mindsets. We are our own worst enemies. Through cynicism, biased criticism, and ridicule, the scientific community and society as a whole have suppressed exploration of the mind frontier. Greater psychic awareness is the key to opening our minds and discovering the hidden treasures. Dr. Roger A. Beaumont, professor of history at Texas A&M University, has published more than 40 articles and 3 books on military history and strategic studies. In a 1982 article in Signal magazine, he points out, in the West, psychic research has long been tainted by sensationalism and some charlatanism. The dramatic and the absurd overtones of the popular culture aspect of ESP has led even the more conservative elements of the popular press to treat ESP as a novelty. Major centers of ESP research in the West at Utrecht, London, and Duke University have come under suspicion from many scientists. As a result, researchers have labored to prove an effect which the Soviets accept and attempt to explain and control. Dr. Beaumont's comments are certainly proven true when one considers the continued skepticism of the scientific community in the view of the extraordinary potential Soviet threat. According to Russell Targ, one of the reasons psi research has suffered is that critics suggest any acceptance of scientific data in the field of psych research would be inherently irrational. A survey of America's elite scientists, which elicited 353 responses from 497 council members and committee members of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, was published in June 1982. The study states, although recent studies hint that belief in ESP may be increasing among the general population and among the scientific community, the elite scientific group polled by this study demonstrated the highest level of skepticism of any major group surveyed within the last 20 years. Also mentioned in this report was a movement started in 1979 that sought to disaffiliate the Parapsychology Association from the AAAS. It is interesting to note that among this elite group, believers in ESP tend to cite personal experience as ground for their belief. Skeptics tend to cite a priori reasons as grounds for disbelief. The prevailing concepts and negative peer pressure within the scientific community is best shown by the 1984 award of a $750,000 endowment for parapsychology research to the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Leading British universities, including Oxford and Cambridge, decided not to apply for the endowment, primarily on the grounds that it would throw doubt on the credibility of other research programs. Obviously, this is an example of the suspicion Dr. Beaumont was talking about. It is an indication that major self-imposed obstacles continue to impede psychic research. The first great battle of any mind race must be fought within ourselves. If each of us becomes more aware and open-minded to the reality of paranormal phenomena, we can learn to use these treasures rather than fear them. They are treasures. This greater psychic awareness has perhaps already begun. I think it's happening now, solidly. A survey by the president of the American Society for Social Psychiatry revealed in 1981 that 58% of medical faculties polled felt that understanding of psychic phenomenon is important to future graduates of psychiatry programs, and that American public accept the reality of psychic phenomenon, with 51% believing in ESP and 37% believing in precognition. The June 1983 Congressional Research Service report says all polls of both the public and the scientific community in recent years have yielded evidence of a generally positive attitude toward the existence and relevance of psi phenomenon as a class and research into them. The general public accepts the concept of psi, often based on personal experience. But given such great controversy within the scientific community, what should be the military attitude? What are the potential military uses and how feasible are they? 13 of the 14 best-known parapsychology laboratories in the United States responded to a questionnaire in 1979, giving us part of the answer. 4 considered espionage possible, 5 likely, and the remaining 4 certain. Similar proportions of the researchers believed psychic powers might be used to psychically harm, sicken, or kill individuals, or to interfere with the operation of physical equipment such as computers. Ronald McRae, an investigative reporter for Jack Anderson, spent over a year sifting through a sea of conjectures, rumors, and confusion, studying conflicting reports, competing interest groups, and conjectures of psychic researchers to compile the most accurate record of facts he could find. His 1984 book, Mind Wars: The True Story of Government Research into the military potential of psychic weapons, provides startling insights into numerous government projects involving psychic functioning. So much so that Professor Marcello Truzzi, director of the Center for Scientific Anomalies Research in Ann Arbor, Michigan, said, "He has given us enough pieces of the puzzle so that we can now at least see some of the areas filled in enough to make a preliminary assessment and recognize that government psi efforts have been grossly publicly underestimated." Similarly, Russell Targ and Keith Harry authored a 1985 national bestseller entitled Mind Race, where they discussed the unclassified portions of over 10 years of government-sponsored psi research at Stanford Research Institute. They note, in laboratories across this country and in many other nations as well, 46 experimental series have investigated remote viewing. 23 of these investigations have reported successful results and produced statistically significant data, where 3 would be expected. Psi research is definitely alive in the United States and internationally. In 1983, the 5th International Conference on Psychotronic Research was held in Bratislava, Czechoslovakia. The founder and president of the 15-year-old International Association for Psychotronic Research, IAPR, was Dr. Zdeněk Redjek from Czechoslovakia. Russell Targ points out that several speakers at this conference expressed a clear desire for openness and cooperation rather than for developing military uses of psi. Targ agrees, but I contend that government and the military have a responsibility to determine what kinds of military uses/threats might exist. Potential military uses. It should not be hard for anyone to envision potential military uses of the powerful psi capabilities discussed thus far. Telepathy, precognition, dowsing, remote viewing, and psychokinesis offer an endless list of possibilities. In 1984, Charles Honorton, director of the Psychophysical Research Laboratories in Princeton, said, "There's potential for military and other uses, but psi has not reached the application stage." Let's look at some specific military uses before addressing the implementation issue. Intelligence. Just like Croesus in 550 BC, remote viewing and precognition can break through barriers of time and space to perhaps eliminate the word secrecy from our vocabulary. This is an important part. 1976, CIA Director George Bush enthusiastically gave retired astronaut Edgar Mitchell, quote, permission to organize high-level seminars at the CIA to discuss possible intelligence applications of parapsychology. Although interest waned in 1977 when Admiral Stansfield Turner replaced Bush, it shows there are others who see definite psi applications for the intelligence community. As mentioned earlier, 4 of the best-known U.S. parapsychology laboratories are certain that psi can be used for espionage. These 4 labs must have known about Project Scanate. In a previous section of this paper, I quoted Henry Griss and William Dick's 1978 book, where 2 U.S. psychics described super-secret military installations and even the contents of confidential files at the installation. Ronald McRae's 1984 book gives more details on this actual test. Psychics versus the CIA, extrasensory perception against the most sophisticated codes known to the U.S. National Security Agency, remote viewing against satellite photography, and top U.S. agents behind the Iron Curtain. The whole of the U.S. national security apparatus cooperating to make cheating impossible. The test was dubbed Project Scanate, an impossible test with impossible results. Pudov, Targ, and the psychics won. The following example demonstrates some results. On impulse, Pudov gave Price the coordinates for the latest series of targets selected by the CIA. including an area in Virginia approximately 135 miles southwest of Washington, D.C. 3 days later, he got Price's 5-page written response in the mail, beginning with a description of the area from an altitude of 1,500 feet and ending with a tour through building interiors. The tour was complete with description of equipment, names from desks, and just to show he was serious, a list of a dozen labelings on file folders locked in a file cabinet. 3 weeks later, the CIA informed him, Puthoff, that Price was right. Exactly right. The other psychic, Swan, although sometimes ambiguous or off the mark, also was remarkable when he described a previously unknown Soviet installation sketching buildings and rail lines and noting an unusually high proportion of women among the personnel. A U.S. spy satellite verified Swan's report 3 months later. Another example involved Navy Captain Joseph L. Dick, the leader of the Defense Intelligence Agency office responsible for gathering evidence on potentially live MIAs. He used psychics and said, some of their leads have checked out. They've been able to visualize aircraft crashes, and we found the wreckage where they indicated. Remote viewing is obviously a capability well suited to the intelligence business and unobstructed by distance limitations. Remote viewing showed that the planet Jupiter had faint rings, like those of its neighbor Saturn. Astronomers scoffed at this claim. Carl Sagan called it, quote, ridiculous. 9 years later, Voyager 1 sent back pictures of the Jovian rings. I found this part very funny when I first went through it, because I know a lot of people love Carl Sagan and they quote science and science this, and I'm butchering his phrase, but with great what do they say? With great beliefs come great proofs, or something like that with Sagan. And this remote viewing kind of just proved him wrong, because he didn't believe the simple information that was presented to him, and it turned out it was true. The person did not have a great proof, but they were right. So it's just an interesting thing I noticed in reading. In addition to remote viewing, map dowsing could be used to pinpoint the locations of Soviet submarines or find underground tunnels in the Korean demilitarized zone. Personnel. Before discussing potential personnel applications of psi, let me remind you that at least 4 of the U.S. best-known parapsychology research laboratories are certain, quote, psychic powers might be used to physically harm, sicken, or kill individuals, end quote. Their confidence is probably based on experiments like that done in 1975 at San Francisco Medical Research Institute with psychic healer Dean Kraft. He was to try psychically to lower the blood pressure and heart rate of a laboratory rat in a plexiglass cage. The observers, however, had an opportunity to watch for 20 minutes and record the steady decrease of the rat's heart rate, all the way to 0. He mentally killed the rat without any contact. Similarly, Nina Kulagina of the Soviet Union is known for her psychokinetic abilities. After just 40 seconds of focusing her mental influences, she was able to completely stop an isolated frog heart from a distance of about 1.5 meters. Quote, when we, Soviet Professor Gennady Sergeyev, examined it, we found that it was torn apart as if bombarded by lightning bolts of microscopic size. The energy flow can reach incredible intensity. Lightning balls, like Jedi stuff. From these examples, we see the lethality of this type of psi. Soviet interest in these capabilities is nothing new. Targ notes, experiments that feature induced pain or behavioral manipulation at a distance have been the distinguishing characteristics of almost all official Soviet psi research since the early 1920s. From the mid-60s until the mid-70s, the KGB beamed mysterious microwave radiation at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. This bombardment did not exceed U.S. health standards, but did exceed much more rigid Soviet standards. Why are Soviet standards more rigid than ours? And why were they putting U.S. Embassy personnel at greater risk than they would allow their own personnel for no apparent reason? From a more positive view, psi could be used to monitor and even restore health from great distances. A doctor could diagnose and treat many patients via remote control. Or better yet, experiments in biofeedback have shown that our minds have the ability to control much of our own physiology. When discussing the interaction of mind and matter, Alexander said the functions of the autonomic nervous system, previously thought to operate independently of the conscious mind, can be controlled with training. We can develop this ability to control stress, fear, and even bleeding. Another potential area for psi use is personnel training. In 1982 at Fort Hood, Texas, the Army tested a program where soldiers practiced visualizing their combat tasks to improve their human performance. An expanded contract was then initiated to train Green Berets' meditation skills so they could adapt to long hours behind enemy lines. What about executive decision-making and stress management? In today's analytical and statistical world, we tend to underdevelop our gut instincts, but good leaders and visionaries recognize the value of a highly sensitized intuition. Albert Einstein said the really valuable factors attributing to his theory of relativity was intuition. Targ says through psi, quote, you can learn to evaluate the reliability of your intuitive impressions. Communications. Just think of the possibilities telepathy provides in the area of communications. Direct mind-to-mind link-ups could eliminate security problems and provide direct access anywhere without equipment dependencies. Soviet researcher Paul Nomov described an experiment where a mother rabbit was placed in a laboratory with electrodes implanted in her brain to monitor activity. Her baby rabbits were taken aboard a submarine, which then submerged deep in the ocean. At synchronized times, the baby rabbits were killed, and at each precise moment, the mother rabbit's brain reacted. The innate form of communication which traversed great distance and ocean depths may be the source of many natural instincts. When asked in an interview about the limits to man's extended mental awareness, Targ responded, one of the conclusions of our decade of research at SRI is that we found no bounds for psychic functioning. As physicists, we always try and look for the limits of phenomena. But what we found is that electromagnetic shielding does not interfere with psychic functioning. We even went to the extent of having remote viewing experiments conducted with the viewer submerged in a submarine under 500 feet of seawater. That greatly alters even the lowest frequency of electromagnetic waves. But we found the viewers perfectly able to do remote viewing from the submarine, just as they had done on dry land. We also found that they were to look across distances up to thousands of miles. So from our experiments, we found that neither distance nor electromagnetic shielding interfered with psychic functioning. Bearden goes even further. He postulates that through the use of psychotronic electromagnetic scalar weapons, all forms of electronic communications are vulnerable. I agree. He supports an emerging theory of local general relativity, which does not assume that local space-time is always flat, but rather allows the individual conservation laws to be violated locally. I think Tesla agreed with that too. The major implication of this startling new engineering physics is that one can engineer physical reality itself. Communication faster than light speed is possible. Yep, a lot of things faster than light speed are possible, and folks are going to learn that. Electronic equipment. Many researchers are concentrating on tests of lower psychokinesis called micro-PK. Typically, the psychic subject tries to influence a simple mechanical or electrical system such as a sensitive thermometer or computer microchip, which can be affected by a very low level of energy. Robert Jan, Dean of the School of Engineering and Applied Science at Princeton University, says such tests have shown consistently positive results. If a microchip and other electronic equipment can be mentally manipulated, the new high-tech information revolution has just been handed a deadly setback. Financial institutions, businesses, governments, and those dependent on computers are suddenly very vulnerable. This apparent capability has created a paranoia amongst talented psychics in the parapsychology field, perhaps with some justification. Researcher Jeffrey Mishlove believes that anyone with the ability to jam computers would probably have to be destroyed. How big of a step is it from being able to mentally stop an elevator at will to manipulating the computer or electronics of a weapons system? Weapons. Through psychotronics, Bearden says almost every weapons system we presently have or are developing is vulnerable to scalar EM weaponry. Once again, we see existing weapons and technology possibly falling prey to a new weapons generation called psychotronics. He developed this weapons list in 1980. The following list enumerates all the probable Soviet psychotronic weapons that I am aware of. 1. Electromagnetic field canceller. 2. Electron current canceller. 3. Death radiator de-inceptor. 4. Free energy generator. 5. Psychotronic bomb. 6. Brain link. 7. Brain probe. 8. Disease radiator ray. 9. Emotion radiator ray. 10. Anti-submarine systems. 11. Teleporters prototype. 12. Force generators. 13. Ortho frame generators. 14. Quark/anti-quark rays. 15. Distant telepathy. 16. Nuclear radiation inhibitors. 17. Mental implantation. 18. Anti-ballistic missile submarines mid-course and terminal. 19. Materializer shields. 20. Sweeps for nuclear debris. 21. AAA systems. 22. Anti-satellite systems. 23. Tesla effect weapons. 24. Earthquake generators. 25. Anti-vehicle systems. 26. Weather control systems. He and others have continued monitoring and documenting instances where they believe these weapons have been tested, theorizing the possible effects and matching them up with real-world paranormal events. Typical incidents he describes include a Tesla weapon at Sarshagin, scalar potential interferometer, nuclear flashes off the coast of Africa, the 15 April 1979 Yugoslavian earthquake, a Tesla shield sighted in August 1980, a continuous Tesla fireball in Lithuania on 10 September 1976, a continuous Tesla EMP globe in Iran, East Coast aerial blasts, high burst registration in 1977 and 1978, booms in Delaware in 1982, and laser blinding of U.S. satellites in 1975. More recent incidents include abnormalities during Titan launches, shuttle launches, and even associated weather anomalies. Think, the ability to manipulate the weather would allow you to literally control the fog of war, but Bearden's 1986 apocalyptic message foretells of an ultimate destructive power. There is a special time bomb ticking away for all of humanity. For the first time, the total destruction of our entire biosphere and perhaps our entire solar system is only moments away from the finger on the trigger. Just how feasible are these potential military uses of psi? Feasibility of operational employment. The experiments of the 1970s should more than convince you of psi's potential military uses. But why did Charles Honorton say in 1984 that psi has not reached the application stage? Probably because to use psi capabilities operationally requires 1, the ability to control psi so it can be repeated on demand, 2, the ability to teach and learn it, 3, the ability to practice, gain confidence, improve our understanding, and increase reliability. How close are we to satisfying these requirements? Controllability. Psi is frequently criticized because it's so unpredictable. Psychics are not always successful, experiments are hard to replicate, and therefore use upon demand is unreliable. But is that reason to exclude it altogether? We see it used mainly in situations where there are no alternatives. The Defense Department used psychics in an attempt to find General Dozier, kidnapped by the Italian Red Brigade in January 1982. All attempts were unsuccessful and unrelated to his eventual rescue. But if 100% reliability is required, then no technique used today is acceptable either. A CIA-commissioned independent evaluation following Project Scanate concluded, manifestations of extrasensory perception were sufficiently sharp and clear-cut to justify serious considerations of possible applications. However, it cautioned that existing ignorance of the basis of paranormal phenomenon, together with the capricious and unreliable nature of the channel, dictate that information derived from this source can never stand alone and must be used with caution. Who said never say never? Psi could be routinely used to complement other systems we have, and as a last resort, when and where appropriate. Remember, a 1983 Congressional Research Service report says dowsing for water, oil, and other minerals is an established practice around the world. Similarly, other professionals are using psi functioning to assist them in their businesses. Police seeking help identifying clues and suspects in criminal investigations. Mr. Price, that was Pat Price, frequently used his talents as police commissioner of Burbank, California. Healthcare specialists utilize psi techniques for determining and improving patients' health. Companies and individual property owners to locate water for drilling wells. But where do you find people like the Delphi Oracle or Mr. Price? Learnability. After years of study, Targ says, we are certain that psychic abilities are a totally normal aspect of human awareness and that you can learn to develop this potential sanely and rationally. Anyone who decides for himself that it is safe to experience paranormal functioning can learn to do so. The key to learning appears to be acceptance and support, rather than skepticism and criticism. Since Western society has repressed these psychic abilities, most people experiencing psi also tend to ignore their potential and usefulness. In our society, a person who's beginning to experience emerging psychic abilities or who is interested in doing so has almost nowhere to turn for guidance. They can admit their interest. I think there's a typo. They can't admit their interest and risk being branded as social deviants, or they can deny their interests in psychic functioning and thereby become alienated from what might be an important aspect of their own lives and experiences. Sorry, there wasn't a typo. However, as people hear more about these capabilities and realize psi functioning in a normal experience, there is a greater sharing and exchange of personal experiences. People from all walks of life are attending personal awareness and assertiveness seminars to learn how to take control of their lives. Instructor Robert Robbins teaches a seminar entitled Fear into Power, the Firewalk Experience. I remember this was going on back in the day, where hundreds of people learn to walk barefoot over hot coals in a 4-hour seminar. The whole concept is that mind and will can control the world. Norman Cousins, an adjunct professor at the UCLA School of Medicine, has written 2 books on the subject of self-healing. He is certain that the mind has the power to affect physical processes. Excuse me. In Russia, professional mineralogists and geologists are taught dowsing at Tomsk Polytechnical Institute. Similarly, the U.S. National Dowsing Association teaches classes at annual conferences to anyone who is interested. After using many untrained individuals in remote viewing experiments, Targ concludes, the best scientific research suggests that the capacity for developing genuine psychic abilities lies latent in many, or perhaps most, people. In 1984, the U.S. Army initiated a 2-year study to evaluate the potential of certain unconventional methods to enhance human performance. That study recently concluded. Sleep learning, mental imaging, and accelerated learning programs are among the unconventional techniques which may improve soldier performance. However, the committee rejected parapsychological techniques such as extrasensory perception and psychokinesis as scientifically unsupportable. Note this study rejects psi because it is not scientifically supportable, but does it work? During Vietnam, the Marine Corps trained a platoon of dowsers to locate hidden tunnels and weapon caches in I Corps near Hue. They were withdrawn after 5 months because the successful use of dowsing appeared to require special skills that cannot be taught to the average Marine. The commander of the Training and Development Command did not discredit dowsing, but morally pointed out there's a special skill his Marines hadn't mastered. Practice. Given that psi can be controlled, taught, and learned, it probably required more than a 4-hour short course for use operationally. Many skills require specialization, long-term training, and extensive practice to master. Success rates. We like having success rates as human rates. The practice is to gain confidence. If you practice more, you'll get the confidence and you'll see that it'll work. It's just like practicing guitar. The experienced psi practitioners of today are those people who have spent years developing their individual talents. With those years of experience comes the increased confidence of how to use their talents. Like other normal skills, practice and training improve performance, understanding, and reliability. And those who have learned the most about psi are best suited to begin training a new vanguard to carry on and improve their skills. But in the hostile environment of Western society, the history of psi has been one of independent research and independent findings, held closely to prevent the scorn of organized science and society. Yeah, let's stop doing that, folks. Let's break this one open and talk about it. Consequently, we continue to lose the knowledge and experience of past masters, rather than building on their understanding to improve our own. The one historic thread of commonality is a belief that psi exists and can offer much more for the future of mankind. In 1983, Targ said that our understanding has reached the point where we can seriously consider transferring the remote viewing technology from laboratory research to real-world applications. Are we ready? Operational availability. There are three avenues that parapsychologists have long since recognized as possible routes to general acceptance of psi. 1. Through experiments which produce psi upon demand in laboratories so skeptics are convinced that all conditions are correctly controlled. 2. Through mainstream science's acceptance of new theories which explain psi phenomena. 3. Through finding practical applications that work regardless of our limited understanding. Researchers have traditionally tried to use method 1 to convince the scientific community, but prevailing concepts reign supreme. Method 2 is also directly dependent on the scientific community and is very unlikely given the limited understanding of psi today. That is why psi practitioners and many researchers have gone to method 3 in the 1980s. Through practical application, they can develop their skills, leave prevailing concepts behind, along with the scientific community. Many researchers point to how the scientific community was the last to accept hypnotism, so to researchers feel psi will gain acceptance from society long before the scientific community comes to grips with it. Operational use of psi is up to the user. King Croesus was content after one test to use the Delphi Oracle. World-famous psyker Edgar I. Casey advised General John Pershing and accompanied him on European missions. If you haven't studied Edgar Casey, you totally should. Even General Patton used the psi talents of a water dowser while in North Africa. More recently, according to Barbara Honegger, who worked 3 years in the White House Office of Policy Development for the Reagan administration, parapsychology played a major role in one of the administration's most controversial defense decisions, abandoning the Carter administration's shell game deployment for the MX missile. In other words, U.S. studies showed Soviet psychics could beat the shell game and pinpoint the missiles. These examples show how operational use depends usually on someone taking the risk to try unorthodox techniques. Congressman Charlie Rose is a respected long-term congressman and member of the House Select Committee on Intelligence. He takes psychic weapons seriously, but in 1984 didn't think we had the technology to build them. The congressman's personal experience has convinced him such breakthroughs are on the horizon. He has attended classified demonstrations on remote viewing arranged by the CIA. Says Rose, quote, "I've seen some incredible examples of remote viewing, so much so that I think we ought to pay close attention to developments in this field, and especially to what the Soviets are doing. If they develop a capacity to have people mentally view secret centers within this country, we could come to the point where we didn't have any secrets." Bearden thinks those breakthroughs have occurred. I agree. He has documented evidence that the Soviets are beyond the speculation and research stages and have deployed psi weapons systems ready to strike. With the threat so near, why are we so unprepared? Self-imposed obstacles. Despite extensive evidence of psi and its tremendous potential use as an instrument of power, we continue to impede our own progress. Our mindset, extreme secrecy, and disjoint research fuels skepticism and criticism rather than seeking truth. Mindset. The history of psi in Western society is filled with distinguished scientists from diverse fields who became maligned and professionally ridiculed for their psychic research. People feared that science would undermine traditional religious beliefs. Even electricity was considered to be an occult and mystical force in the 1850s. Robert Hare, a major American chemist, Alfred Russel Wallace, the co-founder with Darwin of the theory of evolution by natural selection, and Sir William Crookes, the chemist and physicist who discovered thallium and invented the radiometer, were the first of a continual succession of eminent scientists who endorsed paranormal claims on their own research. Even today, the 130 years of controversy over psychical research is impeding progress. Robert Jan, professor of aerospace sciences and dean of the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences at Princeton, related one experience. "I confess that I discuss parapsychology research with some trepidation, born of previous unpleasant experiences. For example, a lighthearted article in the Princeton Alumni magazine in which I attempted to share some of my experiences in this field with the university community at large, but an intensity and breadth of reactions for which I was totally unprepared, ranging from irresponsible and categorical condemnation on one extreme to equally irrational messianic accolades on the other. Rather than precipitating further such distracting outbursts, I have largely avoided opportunities for public presentation. As long as the scientific community continues to challenge the existence of psi, experiments to improve our understanding of it are limited. Few Soviet-style experiments are done in this country because it is difficult to obtain funding to explore the mechanisms of psi when its very existence is politically controversial in the scientific community. This mindset is best described by one eminent physicist who read SRI's report on years of remote viewing research. Quote, "This is something I won't believe even if it turns out to be true." Even author Ronald McCrae, after his investigation into government psi research, is plagued with the Western culture mindset. Personally, I cannot accept the reality of remote viewing. Bearden says, even when Western scientists are confronted with the actual Soviet tests of these psychotronic weapons directly over their heads, they do not recognize the weaponry nor the nature of the effects produced. Remember that, folks. It could be right over your head and you won't even know. How can this kind of atmosphere promote the search for truth? It won't. It retards it. In 1977, a group of prominent self-appointed people such as Carl Sagan and astrophysicist Dennis Rollins formed the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal to refute all claims of paranormal events. This committee was later rebuked by Rollins himself, a co-founder of the committee, because of the integrity of some of those who make a career of opposing anomaly research. He said, "I now believe that if a flying saucer landed in the backyard of a leading anti-UFO spokesman, he might hide the incident from the public, for the public's own good, of course. He might swiftly convince himself that the landing was a hoax, a delusion, or an unfortunate or mundane phenomenon which could be explained away with further research." This mentality is even more disturbing when we see the debilitating effects it can have. Case in point, a February 1987 article in Omni states, "In one strange incident, CSOP," that's the group that Sagan formed, "a CSOP official, Philip J. Klass, learning from a forum on anomalies research that the University of Nebraska was sponsoring, called the school to protest that CSOP's views were not being represented, and that, moreover, in questioning the United States government's word on the non-existence of UFOs, speakers at the conference were seeking what the Soviet Union does to convey to the public that our government cannot be trusted, that it lies, that it falsifies. As a patriotic American, I very much resent this." After Klass threatened legal action against the university, it canceled its sponsorship of future conferences of this kind. Klass withdrew the threat and pronounced himself satisfied with the university's action. Since then, satellite groups of debunkers have proliferated all around the country, determined to do battle with pseudoscience, real and imagined. Not content simply to argue the issues on their merits, they have harassed colleges and universities into dropping, usually non-credit courses, in parapsychology, conducted vituperative, new word for me, vituperative campaigns against anomaly proponents, and done in the words of Philadelphia Drew Endicott, one of their number, anything short of criminal activity to get the point across to people who have no demonstrated facility to reason. Given this obstacle, which many in the scientific community create, the military is confronted with a similar situation, both personal and professional. Can the military risk association with the scorned psychic community? Can a military officer? I stated earlier that operational use of psi is equally dependent on the user as well as the psychic. What is the military mindset when dealing with parapsychology? I began this research because I was concerned the military establishment was unaware of psi potential applications or not taking Lieutenant Colonel Alexander's message seriously. As my research indicates, the government, or at least some individuals, were well ahead of me. They have been involved, daring to try unorthodox techniques and helping demonstrate the existence of psi by using it when all else failed. But the military and government is a reflection of its society. So the controversy exists there also. Congressman Rose thinks skeptics in the Pentagon and CIA are hindering U.S. research in remote viewing and wonders openly about their motives. Some of the intelligence people I've talked to know that remote viewing works, although they still block further research on it since they claim it's not yet as accurate as satellite photography. But it seems to me that it would be a hell of a cheap radar system, and if the Russians have it and we don't, we are in serious trouble. This country wasn't afraid to look into the strange physics behind lasers and semiconductors, and I don't think it should be afraid to look at this. Samuel Kozlov, the Assistant Secretary of the Navy who tried unsuccessfully to eliminate psychic research, dislikes even the mention of so-called psychic weapons. Navy research in the mid-70s determined that psychics could detect remote electromagnetic sources, indicating perhaps they could also detect submerged submarines. The Navy also sponsored research to see if psychics could influence the magnetometers used to detect the magnetism of submerged substances. Dr. Joel Lawson, once head of Naval Electronic Systems Command, said, "I have always believed that ESP is the only way to fight submarines." The magnetometer tests were designed to prove the principle. ESP, head of Naval Electronic Systems Command, Dr. Joel Lawson said, I'm repeating, I've always believed that ESP is the only way to fight submarines. Magnetometer tests were designed to prove that principle. Once willing to discuss psychic warfare openly, now he has been officially silenced. My own research experience demonstrates leaders at all levels do not have a basic understanding of psychic weapons systems. I questioned many general officers on the subject of parapsychology, and only one was even aware of what I was referring to. That one senior officer said, if you are interested in that, you need to have your head examined. He refused to even discuss which service or organization I could contact for more information. The total non-familiarity of senior officers I questioned and similar indications from my Air War College classmates is a poor response to Alexander's 1980 message. Further, the hostile response I received from the one general who had some familiarity indicated either a closed mind or stay away attitude. You can imagine my surprise when I later found his name in a 1984 Washington Post article as one Pentagon general who was impressed with some of the psi results and concerned about the Soviets' lead in psychic research. So I take it he meant to stay away. Extreme secrecy. Through additional research, I was surprised to discover the 1982 Air War College research paper presented the most significant contribution award was on this same topic. An unclassified paper later upgraded to classified and then completely withdrawn. Contacts with the intelligence community for information brought back a resounding no. Regardless of clearance or willingness to make this research effort classified, discussions with previous DoD, PSI, Psi proponents warned it might be all right to do research in this academic situation, but forget if afterward or it could be unhealthy for your career. Or forget it afterward or it could be unhealthy for your career. From this study and these experiences, I will assume the government is pursuing psi research. I'm convinced psi has tremendous human/military applications, which can be used operationally. I'm also convinced that relatively few military leaders at any level are aware of the threat, but most of my original questions remain unanswered. How much research, how well coordinated, how well funded, what priority in impending funding cuts? In addition, I've developed some new concerns. I expected to learn the truth about military applications of psi in current research so I could help identify impacts within my area of specialization, computers and space systems. Instead, I only confirmed Alexander's warning and found that super secrecy in this area is shrouding the truth, promoting skepticism within society and the military, confining military strategic thinking, and ultimately may be more harmful. I, like Congressman Rose, have to wonder the motive. I've felt like an investigative reporter in my own backyard. When talking about the electronic warfare area, experts emphasize how in the past our services treated electronic warfare as a black art far too long. The result was improper resource allocation, which left us with our pants down. I contend psi research has been locked on the same course with significantly greater risk. Many senior leaders have been quick to point out that intelligence is too important to leave the intelligence community. I would add psi capabilities are too important to leave the intelligence community. Marcello Truzio goes one step further. Psi is too important to become the exclusive property of governments, either at home or abroad, who might become interested in exploiting these abilities for their own purposes. Discussions with classmates on the subject demonstrated a reflection of Western society's mindset. Most of the highly technical scientific community didn't even want to discuss it. They may laugh too hard, or if there were any possibility of psychotronics, then the entire scientific community would be jumping at it. Others were caught off guard by its possible reality, and the few who were not surprised, mainly intelligence backgrounds, knew something about it, but had no idea if we're still actively pursuing psi applications. No focal point. The establishment has apparently gone underground and is using titles other than psi, ESP, or parapsychology to contract out research. Targ feels reliable, undistorted scientific information about psychic functioning must be made more easily available and identifiable. McCrae suggests it is fear of ridicule that makes DoD so sensitive to this subject. Any CIA report mentioning psi is automatically classified top secret or higher. He also suggests that parapsychologists not spend a significant portion of their effort on military-related research. The failures of psychic warfare projects in military laboratories, the record shows, have often been among the most irresponsible experiments ever reported. The seances with dead Soviet agents, the multispectral image analyzer that supposedly detects submarines with a photo, the hyperspatial nuclear howitzer, and the anti-missile time warp over the North Pole, to review only a few. His book, Mind Wars, gives an excellent introduction to the broad range of government projects attempted, and what's ridiculous to one may not seem so ridiculous to another. In response, I would suggest he is burning the wheat, those examples used in this paper, with the chaff. Opponents of psi research use the failures to justify abandonment, but Professor Jan says the failures merely underscore the difficulty of a task, not in justifying its abandonment. Historically, examples abound of far more frustrating and costly routes to ultimately attainment of difficult scientific and engineering aspirations, e.g. transmutation of the elements and manned aerospace flight, to name but two. The less focused the initiatives, the slower the progress and the smaller knowledge base. The less information, the more destructive misinformation. Targ says, reliable, publicly available information about psi research can help protect us all from the damage effects of misinformation. That might come in handy nowadays, huh, folks? Recommendations. 7 years after Alexander's article appeared in the Military Review, I can only concur with his message and more so. The implications of a distant U.S. second place in the parapsychology mind race with the Soviet Union are unthinkable. Total vulnerability. Yet this appears to be a real possibility. We are no better or stronger than our weakest link. We are no better or strong. Our total dependence on high-tech, sophisticated electronic weapon systems may become our Achilles heel. Continued coordinated research is imperative for rapid advancement. Psi-smart leaders at all levels are essential for necessary resource support, strategic thinking, and acceptance of the threat/potential we might soon encounter. Targ would argue that the mind race should not be seen as a psychic competition between nations. Rather, it is a race to develop our own innate potential for extended awareness. While I can agree with this in theory, I agree even more with Marcello Truzzi when he says, our government has a responsibility to achieve security and military parity, if not superiority, in relation to our potential enemies. Thus, even if the probabilities for psi research producing anything practical are small, it would be negligence for our guardians in government to ignore such matters, especially when others are pursuing such avenues. Long shots have paid off in the past. Atomic energy was once a wild idea. Opponents to psi research today are similar to the late Admiral William Leahy, chief of U.S. naval operations from 1937 to 1939. He said, the A-bomb is the biggest fool thing we've ever done. The bomb will never go off, and I will speak as an expert on explosives. To accomplish these objectives means, 1, opening the super-secret door to allow broader classified knowledge of psi's true capabilities, where we are, where we are going. 2, focusing military exploration resources and start targeting capabilities/defenses like we did for the Strategic Defense Initiatives, SDI, in the 80s, people remember that. 3, doing strategic thinking on totally new type of warfare. Totally new type of warfare. Opening the super secret door is necessary to begin acclimating the military community to psi's true capabilities. It is past time for bringing psi into the open where everyone can benefit from a realistic awareness of it. Otherwise, how do we expect people to accept and use psi capabilities? Let's learn from our personal experiences with computers. We are still trying to get leaders accustomed to hands-on computer systems. Changing attitudes takes time. The sooner we begin using Psi to complement other systems, the sooner we will build a reliable Psi force and gain management's confidence, Targ said. We believe the question of Psi's usefulness and importance may be settled in the next decade. Settling this question will not require another century. It will probably be settled in the marketplace and in the everyday lives of millions of people, and not, alas, in the corridors of Cambridge. The military community needs to be poised on this leading edge, lest it fall behind the society it is sworn to protect. Focusing resources and targeting capabilities is the cornerstone to knowing the true picture. Otherwise, who has the stick? Who really knows where we are and what it will take to get where we need to be? How else can we present accurate, reliable information to senior leadership for prioritizing resources? Targ notes that the popular view of our relationship to space and time is inadequate. One possible conclusion is that there is something incomplete about our understanding of the space-time continuum in which we exist. You don't say. This is Bearden's position also. Yeah, mine too. So the military needs to force the scientific community to open their eyes and minds to better understand paranormal events and the new physical principles which explain them. Renowned Soviet physicist and Nobelian P. Kapista informed Soviet leader Khrushchev that if a means of total neutralization of foreign missiles was to be found, it could only come from a group of new principles in physics, which was called energetics. The term energetics was contracted from psychoenergetics and is essentially the expanded physics electromagnetics that Bearden has dubbed scalar electromagnetics. The military needs to find young blood in the scientific community who don't know all the reasons why something can't be done. They are the ones with fresh minds to evaluate Bearden's evolving concept of scalar electromagnetics and to find new physical principles explaining psychic phenomena. August Stern is one person in the West who actually worked in top-secret Soviet military laboratories searching for a physical key to psychic phenomena. He warns, the Soviets will emerge with a completely new view of man, not of muscle and bone, but of quantum physics, magnetism, and electromagnetic waves. When that day comes, he asserts, they won't need to scour the countryside for psychics. They'll just build machines for manipulation of the mind. He goes on to remind us, but remember how surprised you were when they launched Sputnik? You'd better prepare. Strategic thinking is essential to preparing a solid foundation for a totally new type of warfare. The Air War College should incorporate this subject in its curriculum and present it in other futuristic technologies early in the overall curriculum. Knowledge of history must be combined with a knowledge of future weapons systems, space technology, directed energy, psi, etc. To most effectively study war, challenge current leaders, and prepare future warriors. Prepare future warriors. This is the place and time to stimulate military visionaries. In the words of Edgar Allan Poe, those who dream by day are cognizant of many things which escape those who dream only by night. In addition, such as Bearden, Alexander, and others should be invited to a forum similar to the Aerospace Power Symposium, where the issues are put on the table, controversies explained, and the students really understand the weapons and threats they may soon employ or confront. Conclusion. Whew. Thanks for sticking along. Conclusion. Man's greatest potential remains a prisoner of man. Exploring the mind frontier is essential to unlock our innate capabilities and the key to successful exploration in a greater psychic awareness. The mind is rich in unfathomed resources, ripe for exploration. A limitless source of treasures for advancing all mankind and a serious threat to those who ignore its potential. We must overcome our psychic inhibitions, stop denying the existence of paranormal events, and start trying to understand the nature of these events. Alexander's message is still valid and needs repeating. We are at risk. We need to open the security doors and open our minds to educate all levels within the military community. We need a well-coordinated, ongoing military exploration of psi. Since the basic electronic components, which form the foundation of our weapon systems, appear to be vulnerable, we need psi, strategic thinking, to chart the course for entering this entirely new battlefield dimension. In the words of James Thurber, let us not look back in anger, not forward in fear, but around us in awareness. And with that, folks, we are done with this document. Thank you very much for sharing this with me, the Nutball News. I think it provides a lot of insight for folks to see that this conversation has been going on for a very long time. These skills, these energies, these other battlefields of the mind, this other aspect of World War III. This is not new stuff, folks. That was a good read. There's a lot of info in there. Enjoy. I'll put the link down here. You guys will be able to take a look at it yourself. Have a great afternoon. Like, subscribe, share this video. Join me on MeWe. Get your butts off of Facebook. It's over. There's new stuff going on. And if you can help me out with Patreon or PayPal, I really appreciate it. And follow along on Global Enlightenment Radio Network to see what's going on in the community and hear other people's talk as well. Have a great afternoon. Best of luck in your journeys and deciphering your experiences as well. Have a great afternoon.